If there's one thing I think we can all agree on is we've reached a point where there can no longer be any debate. We now live in a world where a mere accusation can destroy a man's life. But what happens when that accusation is proven to be false? The answer, as we've seen time and again and will illustrate today, is not much. Hi, my name is Dan and you're watching Men Need to Be Heard, the channel dedicated to raising awareness on the issues and double standards that men and boys face in today's modern society. And today I want to illustrate the issue of how damaging false allegations are to men and how there is little to no accountability for the women who make them. And to do that, we're going to use the recent case of Angela Yurimova from the Bristol Township in Pennsylvania. Ms. Yurimova accused a man, a complete stranger, one 41-year-old Daniel Pearson, of committing a brutal and terrifying assault against her in a Redner's grocery store parking lot. She claimed he tried to kidnap her, grabbing her, punching her, and trying to rip off her pants, all while dragging her to his vehicle. And based on nothing but her word and her identification of him in a lineup, Pearson was arrested in front of his wife and children, I might add, and then charged with multiple felonies, including attempted kidnapping and criminal attempt to commit rape. He then spent the next 31 days in jail as the case moved forward. The story you may have seen was widely reported, not just in the local news, but nationally. Mr. Pearson was presumed guilty in all of them, his reputation completely and utterly destroyed. But here's the thing, none of it happened. It was a complete and utter fabrication. A lie which ultimately could have sent Mr. Pearson to jail for life. The fact is, Miss Yurimova had never even met Mr. Pearson, but she saw him and thought he looked creepy. And for her, that's all it took. She ran with her assumptions and concocted a story that could have, as I said, landed him behind bars for decades, life even. And why? Why did she do that? As I said, simply because she thought he looked creepy. Take a moment and let that sink in. This is the point we've reached in today's society, where women have been so conditioned to believe that it's all men till it's no men, conditioned to believe that simply looking creepy is sufficient enough cause to make up a fantasy based on suppositions and assumptions in order to destroy the man. And why do these women do it? Well, I'd argue it's because it is a badge of honor for these women. Women who make these allegations are viewed as heroic fighters standing up for all women. And because of that, they know they're going to get a ton of sympathy, validation, and attention for making that allegation, even though they know it's one they've completely made up. They know they'll have thousands upon thousands of other women rushing to support them. Women who will believe them at their word, never questioning anything they said. And they know that in most cases, even when, or should I say if, because so many don't, they get caught lying, they'll face no real consequences. And we're going to talk about what would have happened to Mr. Pearson had he been convicted, because he likely would have been sent to prison for the rest of his life. Anyone who knows anything about prison justice knows the likelihood of that life being shortened would have been very high. The fact is, men who commit unspeakable things to women are usually brutalized by other prisoners, and that's putting it nicely. The guards, no better. And so Mr. Pearson would have at best lived a life of pure hell, likely getting beaten up and shanked in short order. And no amount of protestation of innocence would have ever prevented it. As far as the other prisoners are concerned, if you're there, you did it, and they're going to hold you accountable. Prison justice is unequivocal. It's unrelenting and uncaring about whether the accusations are true or false. It just is, and it's absolute. The likelihood is Mr. Pearson would have been killed for a crime he didn't commit. But you see, none of that mattered to Miss Yurimova. To her, his life, his value as a human being, was no more than a bug you might squash under your shoe. A viewpoint which, sadly, many women have these days. In her mind and in the minds of all the women who rushed to support her, he was a creep, and thus he would have deserved all that he had coming. All I can say is, thank God, at least in this case, her lie was exposed. Thanks to surveillance footage and cell phone data, Mr. Pearson was proven to be innocent beyond any doubt. Heck, his truck, the one she claimed he was trying to drag her to, wasn't even in the area. She made it all up, all of it, and it was only through sheer luck that it was ultimately found out. And what did the authorities do when they realized that? When they realized she lied in hopes of sending a man she knew was completely innocent, to prison for the rest of his life? Well, not much actually. Though to be fair, at least in this case, they did file charges against her. Something that is rarely done in these cases. But those charges, well, they were laughable, especially when weighed against the charges that had been filed against Mr. Pearson. She was charged with filing a false report to law enforcement and obstruction of justice, both of which are considered misdemeanors in most jurisdictions. Again, I ask you to pause and think about what she did. She willfully and knowingly set about to destroy a man, to send him to a life of hell in prison for no other reason than simply because she could. And the best they could come up with to charge her for this crime against this man, was a couple of misdemeanors. And here's the thing. Most of these cases never even get that far. Far too often when the lies are found out, these cases are set aside. No action is taken against the accuser lest the DA's office or law enforcement face the wrath of other women for not just taking the accuser's word for it. You know, for not believing all women. And I've interviewed and spoken to many attorneys and police officers, including ones who were directly involved in investigating these type of cases, and almost every single one was told to bury it when the truth came to light, and when the accuser was proven beyond any doubt to be lying. That's a fact, and it's why the statistics are utter lies. So you might be wondering, what happened in the end? What did Miss Yurimova get for committing her crime? Well, my friends, you might want to sit down for this one if you aren't already. She got a sentence of 45 days to 23 months in Bucks County Jail. She wasn't even sent to prison. Realistically, she'll be out in 6 weeks, maybe a little more if she's unlucky. Add a year of probation, a mental health evaluation, and a whopping $3,600 restitution order, and that's it. That's what the justice system believes is appropriate punishment for destroying a man's life. For sending him to prison for a month when he was charged, and potentially keeping him there for the rest of his life. Again, I want to reiterate the realities here. The charges Pearson faced, attempted kidnapping, assault, sexual assault, could have led to a sentence of 10 to 20 years in prison. And that's only if he got lucky. Very, very lucky. In reality, it's far more likely he would have ended up spending the rest of his life behind bars. Not to mention his name would have been added to the sex offender registry for the rest of his days. He would have lost his freedom, his reputation, his job prospects, his social relationships, and quite possibly his will to live. Instead, he only spent 31 days in jail, over a month of fear, anxiety, and isolation, wondering if the system would believe the truth or her lie. And oh, by the way, and this is critical to understand, even though he was completely exonerated, his arrest is still a matter of public record. So anytime someone does a search on him or a background check, like say for a job, guess what? That record is going to come up, even though he never did anything wrong. Add to it, if you do a simple Google search of his name, while yes, you'll see news stories that he was found innocent, you'll also see the original ones where he was initially charged and his name dragged through the mud. He, like every man who was falsely accused, will be facing the repercussions of that allegation for the rest of his life. Yurimova, on the other hand, well, she'll probably be home before you finish your next round of laundry. This case, as outrageous as it is actually rare in only one way: that she faced any repercussions or punishment at all. You see, most women who make false allegations face zero consequences, and they know that, and that's why they don't think twice about doing it. Politicians in the legal system bend over backwards to understand their motives. They try and justify them by saying things like, well, maybe she was just confused, or maybe she was drunk. They'll imply there was no malice or bad intent, or that maybe she was coerced or acting out of legitimate fear. They'll even go so far, even with overwhelming evidence to the contrary, to claim that whatever was alleged actually did happen, but she just changed her mind afterward and didn't know how to undo it. Excuse after excuse will be proffered, with prosecutors, judges, and the media alike all too eager to protect her image and give the accuser every benefit of the doubt. Again, let me say, it is an accuser who knowingly and willfully chose to lie. An accuser who, by the way, is almost always a woman. Meanwhile, the men they accuse, well, they're treated as guilty from the moment the accusation is made. They get no compassion, no consideration, no sympathy. Not just while facing the allegation, but long afterward, even when they've been proved innocent. Ask any man who has faced a criminal investigation based on allegations like this, and they'll tell you there is an automatic presumption of guilt, one that lasts a lifetime. Their word, their protestations of innocence, will actually be used against them. Hell, their denial of guilt is often turned against them. In fact, I've had multiple police officers admit to me off the record that when they've handled these investigations, they've assumed the man to be guilty until proven innocent, and even more so when he claims he was innocent. For these men, as I've said, their life is forever altered. Jobs are lost, reputations destroyed, their families torn apart. Legal bills, they pile up and up. These men are destroyed mentally, physically, emotionally, and financially, based solely on the word of a woman who is lying. And even if the case is thrown out, even if they're acquitted, even when the accuser is proven beyond any doubt to have lied, hell, even when the accuser flat out admits she's lied, which is what Mrs. Yurimova ultimately did, the man still carries the scarlet letter, the stigma of the accusation, for the rest of his life. Why? Because society has decided that the risk of not believing a real victim, especially a female one, outweighs the cost of ruining an innocent man's life. Society has decided that better 100 innocent men, or even 1,000, go to prison than one guilty one go free. It's a horrifying backward logic based on the assumption that men, well, they're disposable, and women are always truthful and always must be protected. Protected at any cost. A cost, more often than not, paid by men. It's a mindset that has to change. You'll often hear from media and advocacy groups that false allegations are extremely rare, often quoting a number like less than 2%. I've done a deep dive on that in a previous video to show how that figure is misleading at best and a complete misrepresentation and dishonesty at worst. And in that video, I show how it's based on cases where the allegation was definitively proven false in a court of law, which is incredibly hard to do. Think about it. How do you prove a negative? And I'll put a link down below so you can check out that video for more detail. But in short, here's the truth about those so-called statistics. The fact is, most cases never get investigated thoroughly. Evidence disappears, memories become vague, and prosecutors almost always decline to press charges against the accuser, which means that the crime that was actually committed, the lie that created the crime, never shows up in the statistics. But you can be damn sure his arrest based on them does. Again, it's irrelevant whether or not the man is innocent or guilty. What matters is that it's shown he was arrested and that the person who falsely accused him, the one who lied in order to get him arrested, well, more often than not, they want to ensure that that's never recorded anywhere, which of course skews the statistics, makes them irrelevant. And here's another thing. The number of proven false allegations is just the tip of the iceberg. William Collins has written extensively about this, noting that the real rate of false allegations is unknown and probably much higher than anyone in power wants to admit. I've personally done research and I argue that the number is in the millions every single year, and almost all of them will never show up in any statistic. Think about it. How many false allegations are made in family court against fathers? How many men face allegations in the workplace? How many men are accused of heinous things online and in the press every single day? Not a single one of which is considered a false allegation. Yet, that's exactly what they are. Hell, I myself face at least one or two false allegations every single day from women who hurl them at me simply because they don't like what I have to say. Simply because they don't like me exposing things like, oh, I don't know, just how rampant false allegations that women make are. And I've been accused of everything from being a P3DO to an abuser to hating women and worse. All by women who've never met me, never even spoken to me, but who felt compelled to make those allegations simply because they don't want to acknowledge the truth in what I'm saying. And again, none of those will show up in any statistic. Yet I ask you, are they really any different? False allegations have been weaponized to the point they've become an automatic response from today's women. And it shows just why men should presume that every woman is capable of making one. And it's why I say men need to protect themselves. Because whether you want to admit it or not, the likelihood is you could face a false allegation from any woman at any time. Even a woman who claims to love you, or did at one time. Don't believe me? Go spend a day in family court and you'll find out real fast just how prevalent it is. And yet, even when a false allegation is exposed as clearly as it was in this particular case, even when, as is the case here, there is video proof, cell phone data, and a confession, there's still no real punishment for the accuser. One of the most frustrating and damaging aspects of false allegations is how they hurt the real victims. Every lie told by someone like Miss Yurimova makes it that much harder for actual survivors to be believed. The justice system gets overwhelmed. Law enforcement becomes skeptical. Juries become jaded, and rightfully so, which again causes irreparable harm to actual victims and sadly allows actual perpetrators to go free. And most of all, the men who've been falsely accused, they suffer in tremendous ways. They start to shut down emotionally, and who can blame them? They become terrified to be alone with a woman, afraid to date, afraid to have the most normal of relationships. All because they've had to learn a lesson the hard way, that at any moment, a single accusation, true or not, can and will ruin them. A lesson more and more men are taking to heart. Men are seeing what is happening and are asking themselves, am I next? Am I going to be accused of doing something I didn't do simply because some woman thinks I'm a creep? Am I going to face prison or death simply because a woman doesn't like the way I look, even though I've never even spoken to her or even went near her? False allegations clog the system. They drain resources from cases that need real attention. They weaponize the very protections that are meant to help actual victims. And yet, the system continues to coddle those that do it, continues to invite and encourage those so inclined to keep making those false allegations. There is only one way to stop this madness, and that's to let the punishment fit the crime. The punishment the man would have faced if convicted of the crime that he was falsely accused of. My opinion, if a man is falsely accused of a crime that would carry, say, a 20-year sentence, then the woman who made that knowingly false allegation should face the exact same 20-year sentence, and not 1 day less. That's what justice looks like. If the potential penalty for the accused is decades behind bars, then the accuser who knowingly lied should face those same decades too. That is the only real deterrent. Sadly, as borne out time and again, including in this case, the one we've been illustrating, there really is no downside to lying. If the woman gets caught or even admits that she was lying, the worst case scenario, which is what we saw in this case, is that at most she'll face a couple of months in jail, maybe a fine and some probation. Meanwhile, the man she lied about will continue to be victimized for the rest of his life. Will have to try and rebuild his life from scratch, if he's even able to. This imbalance is not only unjust, it's downright dangerous. So why is this happening? Why are false allegations so prevalent? Well, to answer that, we have to talk about the assumptions that women make, which are leading them to make these accusations. The assumptions that have become so prevalent and ingrained into today's women that it's actually pretty easy to see why they have no problem leaping to them, and why they appear so believable when they make them. If a man approaches a woman and she thinks he's attractive, well, then it's welcomed, considered romantic even, something from a Hallmark movie. But if she doesn't, well, then she's been taught that he's a creep, he's acting weird, or is guilty of harassment. If a man in a corporate office simply says good morning to a female coworker or tells her she looks nice, she's been taught that she should run to HR to report being harassed. And because in her mind he was making her feel uncomfortable in some vague, subjective way, it's completely justified to do so. Hell, men have faced allegations even when they've completely ignored women. In fact, faced them because they ignored women. How dare they not pay attention to me? I'll show him who's boss. And don't even get me started at the myriad of allegations that women and mothers make in divorce and family court every single day, simply to get the upper hand. Remember, in this particular case, Yermova admitted she thought Pearson looked creepy. That was her entire basis for the accusation, for her accusing him of a violent sexual assault. That's not just reckless, it's terrifying. And it's why men not only should be avoiding women everywhere, but are, which is having a deeply negative effect on today's society. It's directly why men are withdrawing from society, withdrawing from the workplace, and withdrawing from relationships. The risk has simply become too great, and only a fool would ignore that risk. There is a growing trend, encouraged by the media and social platforms, where women have been conditioned to view men, all men, with suspicion by default, where it's ingrained in them to believe it's all men till it's no men. That you can never know if a man is safe or dangerous, so you should always assume he's the latter. All while refusing to acknowledge that the very same things can be said of them, especially with regard to their proclivity to make false allegations. And perhaps even more illustrating is when they scream, "Not me, I'm not like that, it's not all women," when you point out the risk that they present to men. The double standard and hypocrisy of it all is astounding. Yet, it's the reality men face every minute of every day. It's no longer just about behavior or action. Today's women judge men based on their appearance, tone of voice, or even their vibe, whatever that is. Men are being judged simply because they're men. Hell, it even applies to boys as well. Even boys as young as 4 and 5 years old, who've been thrown out of school or put on sex offender lists or faced many other consequences for doing the most innocuous of things, the most innocent of things, just because they happen to be born male. I've repeatedly said, if you're a man, especially one who doesn't fit a woman's aesthetic expectations or isn't what's known as conventionally attractive, you're automatically a suspect. Not because of you, your words, or your deeds, but because of your appearance, because of your gender. This isn't justice. This is a deeply held prejudice, a prejudice that's been drilled into today's modern women. It is discrimination, and it's systemic at every level. And when that prejudice turns into a false allegation, it becomes a weapon. A weapon that today's women stand ready to use in order to get attention and validation, especially from other women. It's hard to ignore the institutional bias that allows all of this to happen. In the Yermova case, the district attorney and the chief deputy DA, both women I might add, seemed far more concerned with the potential impact on future sexual assault reports than the man whose life they nearly destroyed. Again, let that sink in. These people who've sworn an oath to justice, to protecting the innocent, instead chose to focus on protecting the guilty. DA Jennifer Shorn talked about the ripple effect of false allegations on the credibility of real victims. A fair point. But she barely gave any lip service to Pearson's suffering, instead focusing most of her energy on how the lie might make it harder to prosecute other cases. Chief Deputy DA, one Kristen McElroy, went even further, stating that research suggests that very few women make false reports, when reality shows it's anything but. This is the kind of feminist boilerplate thinking that does more harm than good, and again shows just how dangerous it is for men in today's society. These women are in positions of authority, and they're displaying this mindset and showing that they're every bit as dangerous to men as the women who make the false allegations. Because by having that mindset, they're showing their judgment is already clouded, that they don't believe in the Constitution or the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. They don't care or show any remorse to the actual victims in these cases, simply because they're men. So deep runs their misandry and presumption of guilt of the man, any man, that it cannot help but to pervade every case they handle. Ask yourself, what man can get a fair investigation, a fair trial, when the focus is not on finding his guilt or innocent, but protecting those who might make an allegation? Instead of acknowledging how easy it is to ruin a man's life with a lie, these DAs double down on the idea that women should always be believed. And that's the crux of the problem. We've built a justice system that prioritizes the fear of not believing a real victim over the need to protect innocent people from malicious lies. And if we want to survive as a society, that has to end. False allegations are a bane to our society. They destroy lives. They destroy trust. They destroy faith in the justice system. And when the consequences for lying are practically non-existent, it's no wonder that more and more people, especially men, are becoming afraid. Afraid of dating, afraid of going out alone, afraid of coworkers, and afraid of being falsely accused and having no way to prove their innocence. Sadly, many women are cheering that on. They think it's simply great. They think it's awesome that what happened to Daniel Pearson could happen to any man at any time. Kind of tells you where their mindset is, doesn't it? And that is something that men need to understand. Remember, he was targeted not because of anything he said or anything he did. No, he was targeted simply because she didn't like the way he looked. She thought he was creepy. That was all it took. And let me tell you, my friends, that can happen to any man from any woman. And for that, his life and yours could be ruined. And the reality is, for that man and potentially you, you'll spend the rest of your life having to prove your innocence over and over and never being able to actually do so. If we want to protect men, women, and the integrity of our justice system, we need serious reform and serious accountability. And we need it now. This means real investigations into every allegation and false ones. Investigations that are done treating the accused as innocent until proven guilty. And more importantly than anything else, holding the false accusers accountable with the same force and severity that the accused would face. And until we do, this won't be the last story. This won't be the last Daniel Pearson. It'll just be the next. And one day, gentlemen, the next might be you. So what do you think? Do you think false allegations are rampant, or is it really just a few? What do you think should happen to those who are proven to be making a false allegation and proven to be lying? What should be done about police officers and DAs who refuse to hold those making false allegations accountable? Should we pass laws explicitly making false allegations a felony with the exact same sentencing guidelines the person they accused would have faced? Let me know in the comments, and please help me to spread the word about just how prevalent false allegations are. Help me share with others the injustice and discrimination the men who are falsely accused face by sharing this video. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. I release a new video every single day. All right, thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Dan, and I hope you have an awesome day.